Hello everybody, welcome back to Wolfeei. Today we propose the question, what if MCC was a Duos event or had a Duos event? I don't know if I've ever done this before, but a recent Block Horse, or not recent, upcoming Block Horse event, which you should watch. Give me a moment, okay? A recent Block Horse, Jesus, I said it again. Upcoming Block Horse event has inspired me to make this video because it's something that I think is honestly very attempted by events. Duo style. I think a duo format is really cool. I think the dynamic of two players on a team makes it for a stronger connection, right? A stronger teamwork connection. I think it makes for a pretty interesting collaborative experience. Either way, if you were unaware, Baablu is hosting a custom Block Horse event tomorrow, as of this upload video date, on March 8th. That'll be at 2 p.m. EST. That should still be 2 p.m. EST. I don't know if the time zone change already applies here. I think the time zone change happens on Sunday, so we'll see. Either way, the Baablu event will be happening tomorrow, on Saturday, and it's a Duos event. It's an event where there's 8 teams of 2, so 16 total players instead of the usual 40 total players, less than half, that is, and a lot of people are hyped for this one because not only does it feature a lot of new faces that Block Horse has never seen, but it also features just duos in general, a different dynamic. It proposes the question of how will some of these games work with 2 players instead of 5. And I guess we're going to have to wait and see. We're going to have to find out at some point tomorrow. But I decided let's make an MCC rendition because the Block Horse rendition we've seen. Wouldn't it be that interesting if I did a Block Horse version? Then we got MCC. You know, MCC up next makes the most sense. Either way, the way I did this is I tried to make them balanced, of course. Just like Baablu here, he tried to make his duo event balanced. I tried to make this hypothetical MCC duo event balanced. That does mean that we will definitely be cutting some of the more iconic duos you might expect to be included. But I did set up a fun little game. So, starting with the red team, you have our first candidate. And also, the first explanation as to why this happened, roughly. I made a total of 10 teams and then a few bonus teams to kind of fill out some of the other potential candidates for this. And the first duo that came to mind, when I think of duos in MCC, historically, I think this might be the #1 iconic duo, and I think it's the nice baseline to try to balance off of. Although I would argue that this team could maybe be slightly weak, depending on the game roster. Fruitberries and Grian is a duo that has been talked about forever. It only happened like once, maybe twice, ever, but we're not stopping the talks about it, man. This is a great duo, great dynamic. We need to see it happen again, please. Season 5 of MCC, surely we can see it happen. Now that Grian is somewhat back in rotation, surely we... Come on, man. Right, surely we'll see it. I don't know. Either way, iconic duo. Pretty decent duo as well. Grian, actually, I feel like is pretty underrated in MCC. I think he's like a pretty average tier player, like around 20th, whether it's a little above or a little below. And maybe 20 to 25. And then Fruit is one of the best players in MCC, right? So that's kind of undeniable. Either way, 2 of these duos were easy peasy picks. The first one being Fruit and Grian. The other one has happened in MCC, but it's iconic for kind of a different reason. That being Shadoune and Sneegsnag, which, if you go over here to the notes... oh, God. Hey, spoilers, notes, you freak. All right, we're good. All right, Shadoune with Sneeg makes a lot of sense. That one is another duo that came to mind. Something that happened semi-recently, you could say, within the past year. And from Twitch Rivals. And since then, they have featured together on a team in almost every major event. Happened in MCC first, I think. Then happened in Block Wars, and then it was supposed to happen in PB, but it didn't. So whatever, right? They also won MCC when they teamed together, so that's pretty cool. They didn't win Black Horse, but they won MCC together, so that's cool. Yeah, don't really need to get into it too much. This one is interesting though because Sneeg, at the time this duo happened in Twitch Rivals, was on an absolutely generational arc in terms of event performance. He was putting up pretty like significantly high numbers, higher than people expected, which I thought made a lot of sense because he has a history of being pretty good at the game. However, since then, I think he's been taking a bit more of a casual, chill approach to events and has dropped down the leaderboard a little bit, which obviously nothing wrong with that. However, it does mean that this duo is a big question mark in terms of balancing, because if we get the locked-in Sneeg, this duo is crazy, but if we get the more laid-back Sneeg, this duo is not crazy. So, I don't know. Anyways, moving along, I guess we're going to do it like this now. On the right, you'll see, hey, who's the S tier that we got, or the top player, or the whatever notable player that we're paying attention to. And in this instance, that was JoJo. Now, the first person that came to mind with JoJo that I think is iconic is Hannah. Fairly sure, and now I could be very wrong, but JoJo and Hannah, I think, have teamed a few times. I think they were on the same team for Hannah's first event. I could be wrong. I looked up through the wiki, by the way, for some of this info. That's why I know that. Otherwise, I would have never been able to tell you. But obviously, the most iconic is their Pride team, the Cyan team, which has happened twice, and would have been cool to put them on the same team. However, if we're trying to make things balanced, I think JoJo plus Hannah is too good. So, that left me with my second choice, which I think makes a lot of sense for a JoJo duo as well, that being Scott. I mean, JoJo and Scott's happened how many times? Like, a lot. A lot of times, at least. And it's a pretty iconic duo. It's happened very frequently. I think it's a very safe duo. I don't think you'll ever get a JoJo and Scott team that isn't, like, at least fun, right? It's always going to be a fun team. Sure, some people may be less excited because it has happened a lot. That's fine. But this duo just makes a lot of sense to happen. They're good friends, and they work well together. So, I like it, and that's why they're on the same team here. Next up, I think we have... Is it Hannah? Oh, we have Ant Frost, actually. The explanation here. With Ant Frost, the first person that comes to mind for a duo is 5UP. They've teamed together a few times. However, with 5UP's recent arc outside of MCC, I think it would be too strong. If you look at his recent MCC performances, on 5UP that is, you could argue that it might be balanced, but even then, 5UP's like around 15th in recent MCCs, and Ant's been on an absolute S tier arc, like genuinely proper S tier arc. And that kind of results in me thinking that 5UP and Ant is too strong. And then Scott was another person that came to mind as like, makes sense to be put with Ant a lot, but Scott's already picked for JoJo, which results in Ant Venom. They're the ants. They're both ant. I don't know what else to tell you, man. This duo only happened once, I think, maybe twice. I could be wrong, but the ant trio, at least, was highly requested for a long time, finally happened in MCC Season 4 kickoff, and now we have, the Ant duo, I guess, which potentially could be pretty iconic here as well, and I think it's actually pretty balanced, too. Ant Venom is a little hit or miss, I think, in MCC, but this should be fine, and yeah, it works. Next up, assuming this thing will work properly, okay, okay, there we go. Shane, up next. I don't know why this thingy is so buggy, but here I'll try to fix it a little. Okay, we're good. Shane, up next. When you think of Shane, iconic duo-wise, the first that comes to mind is Joel. But obviously, Shane and Joel is too good. We ain't letting that one slide again. All right, that's too good, too strong. No, not happening. That does mean that we have to figure out who else could be with Shane, and I'll say this now. To start, I tried to only pick duos that have happened, at least. Otherwise, I would have put Shane with Haley, Ghosty Fruit that is, because obviously that would make a lot of sense to be an iconic duo and possibly would be balanced, maybe a little too strong in here. However, That duo hasn't happened in MCC yet. So I wanted to go try and figure out if there was a somewhat balanced duo that has happened and is iconic enough to make sense to include here. And I think this one makes sense, that being Jimmy, Solidarity Gaming. Shane and Jimmy have teamed, I think, like 3-4 times maybe at this point, and I think Jimmy is Shane's either most or second most common teammate. I think Scar may be a bit more frequent in terms of Fire Breathman teammates. However, I think Shane and Scar would be a little bit on the weaker side. I think Jimmy has been doing pretty good in MCC, and I think this duo could be balanced in this context. So yeah, that's why we include it here. Simple choice as well. I tried to rank these in order of how easy it is to come up with them, or mostly how quickly I came up with these duos. Roughly. Some of them a little different. Next up, though, we have Joel. Joel is good enough, I think, to be considered not an S tier maybe, but a top player, like a top tier of a team. Most commonly, maybe nowadays, maybe not, maybe that's just a season 4 thing, but I think Joel has that dog in him. All right, he's got it. Now Shane, obviously, same thing with or Joel, same thing with Shane. Is that duo is too good. Then I was trying to think of other duos with Joel, and I kind of was struggling a little bit because there's a lot of people that he has teamed with, but to call some of the balanced potential teammates iconic duos with Joel may be a little inconsistent with some of the remaining roster here. So I decided to go off of a very recent example, which is very much an iconic combo of players in which this duo is a part of it. And in the most recent time it happened, this duo both got top 10 and should be pretty balanced, that being Martin. I think, smallish beans in the Littlewood, pretty good duo. It's really hard to tell if it would be balanced in this roster because it is such a small sample size and so recent. But I think potentially it could be pretty balanced. Either way, next up you have Hannah, who was mentioned already for this JoJo tier spot. Hannah is another one, or another person where I was trying to figure out, like, who is an iconic enough teammate for Hannah that's balanced in MCC. JoJo's already picked. I was thinking of, like, Pearl, but I think that might be a little bit too weak as a duo. And also other people like Amy could make sense, right? From the OG team that was in Pride. However, I landed on a duo that has happened twice with Hannah in MCC and is mostly notable for its combination outside of MCC, that being Wally. This could arguably be too strong of a team, although I would say that Wally in MCC has kind of been more chill and hasn't really done that crazy. The one time, or the 2 times I can notably say Wally did really well was when he was teamed with a Bed Wars player, that being Purpled on his first event, and then Hannah on the time that they teamed with Dave and Shelby. I think as a duo it would be fine. I think they're both people that have a lot of potential, but I think they're some of the less consistent high-end players in the roster, and I think it would make for an interesting combination here. I think it could be fun. Next up, though, we have Purpled. Speaking of, the Bed Wars squad, Wally makes the most sense to think of in terms of the duos that have happened that are notable for Purpled in MCC. However, Wally's already taken and also is too strong of a player to pair with Purpled. Same thing would apply with Hannah as well. But I don't think Purpled and Hannah would count for this because they haven't teamed in MCC. And at this point, I don't know if they would, because it is a very strong combo, but maybe there will be an event where that could slide. Then I had to kind of think of what iconic duos has Purpled had in MCC that I think are notable enough to really cherry pick and include here. And I will say the result I ended up going with probably isn't balanced. I think it might be a little too weak, but potentially if Purpled locks in, it could work out. And that is John Masayoshi. Now, the reason I think this is iconic is because they recently have teamed twice. They teamed in Ender Cup, where they made it to the finale, and that was a very huge, notable moment, right? John being the second frag of that team, I think in around like 20th or maybe a little bit higher. And then they also teamed in Twitch Rivals, where they were teamed with Janet and Jem, which I still think is probably my favorite team from Season 4. However, it is also kind of recent, right? Purple and John just coincidentally have teamed twice recently, admittedly though, on two very notable teams in recent history. So I think this duo, qualifies. It is a little odd maybe to throw into the mix here, considering the other choices that were made, but that's kind of what happens. I think there are arguments to be had for another purpled combo that might be a bit more iconic and maybe a bit more balanced, but this one was just the one that I thought made sense, for me at least. Next up though is the actual purple team, which has Pete on the board. Now, Pete is an interesting one. I think Pete's most iconic duo probably is Grian. And the thing is that Grian's already been picked, first of all, and I also don't think with Pete that duo would be balanced, whereas with Fruit it is a bit more balanced because Fruit's a little bit better. Then another duo that I think makes sense based off of the early days of MCC is Vicstar. I forgot about Vic, honestly. I think Vic could have been a pretty good pick, but Vic is kind of out of MCC and I don't think would really be considered for MCC anymore. And then I also thought of H-Bomb, who I think is a little too good to be paired up with Pete for this type of event. And then I just had another person come to mind and I forgot who I was talking about. Oh, SB. SB could also be thrown into the mix, but we don't really know if that's balanced because SB hasn't played in a long time. I also considered SB for teaming up with Hannah, but they haven't been on the same team before. So that one also doesn't qualify. My result ended up being none other than Phil. Now this one is also kind of, again, I told you, it's in order of easiest to hardest. This one is a sample size of 1, I think. It was Phil Zahut was a duo that happened in like season 3, I think, of MCC. I could be wrong, maybe late season 2, either late season 2 or season 3 of MCC. This duo happened, and it was a good duo. It was a good team. I do recall this being a fun combo. However, I don't know if it's like properly iconic in terms of MCC. I think it's a good one. I think it's a fun duo for sure, but I wouldn't consider it properly iconic. So if you were to be like, oh, this one's a little bit cheap, Wolfeei, I don't know about this one, totally fair. I understand. However, we have not one team left, but one main team left to pick from, and that is the duo that I tried to make for none other than Feinberg. Now, in my opinion, and some people might disagree, I don't think with Fine's like 3 events played, 4 events played, I think he's played 4 events now, with Fine's very small sample size of events played, I don't think there is a standout, definitive, iconic duo that you could attach to Feinberg in MCC. Most debatably, it's probably Ollie that would be iconic for teaming with Fine, but that's only from the perspective of you have to include Fine with an MCC player, then Ollie qualifies. I don't think if you look at Ollie for iconic teammates that Fine would even make top 3, probably. So I don't think that one qualifies. So, admittedly, with Fine's inclusion here, I went for a duo that hasn't happened yet, because I just had, you can already expect who it probably is. There is a balanced duo in this format who you could put with Feinberg, who has played MCC 1 time at the start of season 4, who is very known to be paired up with Feinberg in other things, that being none other than Small Ant. Don't really need to explain this one. They're both in House Builder Gang. It makes a lot of sense. This is just a duo that makes a lot of sense. So, that's not all though, because we have a few more teams to look at. I made some bonus teams that I think could be fun to consider as well for this type of event, although I would say that they're mostly consisting of either people that you wouldn't consider like main MCC players, or duos that I think if you were to include it here, you'd exclude someone who you would argue should be in a bit more. First, Me. The choice is either me and Jeremy or me and 5UP. Now, 5UP's a little bit too strong, probably. If we're saying this for Antfrost, it probably applies to me too. Me and 5UP is probably too good. So, me and Jeremy would make sense. Although, sample size of 1, context and environment, etc., blah, 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 whatever, right? So many factors that come into play to debate whether it's actually balanced or not, but I think me and Jeremy make sense. And technically, if I were to, I guess, be okay with it, which probably not, could even be the only non-English team. We technically could speak Dutch on this team, technically. Although I don't really know if I'd want to do that on stream, but you know what I mean. Either way, next up, we have Dave, who I think, I don't really know if Dave has iconic duos in MCC. He has an iconic team in MCC, being the Crimson Krakens. And from that team, the two people, well, there's 3 teammates. 2 of them, I think you could argue, are balanced for this type of event. I think Ryan is a bit closer than Jordan in terms of being balanced, although very hit or miss. So Dave Karatzi and Ryan Cornelius is another duo. Next up, you have a very obvious one. Curryway and Lewis Fulham. Makes sense. That just makes sense. Curry is someone who I think is very much on the up in terms of properly being an MCC. He played twice, both of the Twitch Rivals events of Season 4. I think he very, very much deserves being in the main roster, especially with his recent push for content creation in general. I think it is very much deserved if he were to be given an opportunity to play. And because Curry hasn't played that much MCC yet, I think his most iconic duo from what has happened is Lewis, which makes sense. They're like really, really good friends and are both speedrunners, etc., have known each other for a while. Makes a lot of sense for them to be paired up together. Next up, though, is Sandwich and Toby. Now, the thing with Sandwich and Toby is that Sandwich, again, sample size of 1 of playing in the event. That leaves him with 3 potential people to pick from in terms of teammates you could pair him up with. You could also argue maybe that like Phil could have worked here, although that's maybe a little bit strong, or Tommy could have worked here, although Tommy doesn't really play the event anymore. Toby makes the most sense. They teamed on the same team. Toby is probably the most fair of the 3 teammates you could give to Sandwich to make it a bit more balanced, and I think it makes for an interesting pairing. And then finally, you have Missy and Jordan, which is a kind of an odd pick, although I would argue that Missy doesn't really have a definitive duo from playing in MCC. Missy's played 2 Pride events. The first one was with Dave and with Gizzy and with, I'm so sorry, I'm forgetting, Elena. Either Gizzy or Elena is probably a little bit weak in terms of this format, and Dave is too good. Also, again, I don't think either of those or any of those 3 teammates is an iconic duo that you could call in terms of Misty. Second time was with Ryan, was with Kara, and was with Sniff. Same situation. I don't think any of those 3 people would be a definitive duo for Misty. So I then instead opted for which MCC players are notable for collaborating with Misty, and Jordan is probably the most common, or just one of the most common guests that appears in Misty's videos. And this is kind of pretty much balanced. I think it should be close to balanced, at least in terms of how Misty's performed in MCC. Misty's like a proper S tier. Should be pretty good. So there you go. That's the list. That's the list I decided to make. That's it. Let me know your thoughts on the duos event for MCC. Which duo would you like to see in this type of format? And do you think this would be a fun format to watch? I think it could be really fun, although there is the argument of you're only letting 20 people play, or that's kind of it, really. So I don't know if it would ever happen, but it would be fun. I think it's a fun experiment to try out. So anyways, also, let me know which duo you think wins. Which one is your favorite, and which one do you think wins? Let me know your thoughts, and I'll see you later. Goodbye.